Break-even analysis is a very popular exam question. You can rest assured that you would be getting one of these questions in either of your papers. And normally not normally, they always work in threes. So the first thing you need to do, or you're going to set up an equation. So either you set up an equation and then you use the equation to draw the table. And once you've drawn the table, you then draw the graphs. Now you can choose which is easiest for you. Some people find it easier to find the pattern, so they like to fill in the table first. And if you can fill in that table, you know exactly what the equations are. You just have to be able to write it in a mathematical form. So let's have a look at the question. It says, draw a graph of income and expenses in order to see how many tickets must be sold in order to make a profit or break even. So remember, your cost price is always less than your selling price because we're going to sell something to make a profit. So from this, the cost per person is 85 Rand. So that is going to be your cost. You have a base fee, so when there is a value that you have to add to the costs, that is called your base fee, and that will be factored into the cost per person, and then they sell the tickets at 120 Rand per person. So the selling price is going to be 120 Rand per person. The cost price is going to be your 85 Rand plus the base fee. Now remember, when there is a base fee, your table is always going to start at that value. So your expenses are going to start at 3,700 Rand. Whereas your income, if you sold no tickets or no people are coming, you will still have 0. Right, I've written up the equation for you. So putting this into a mathematical context, the cost is your base fee plus the number of people, and it is going to cost 85 Rand to cater for one person. So to find for 50 people, you are going to say 3,700 plus 50 times 85 Rand, and you will get 6,000. And 100, then you will just change the 50 to 100, and 130 would be 15,600. That is your expenses. So how did we get to 130? Well, you are going to go and you are going to say 3,700, and you're going to multiply 130 people by 85 Rand, and your expenses would be 14,750 Rand. So that's what it would cost to cater for 130 people. The income, you're purely going to get an income of 120 Rand per person. So 120 Rand times the number of people. So 50 times 120 will give you 6,000. 100 would be 12,000. Right, so how do we get this value here? Well, you're going to say 120 x times the number of people must give you a value of 13,200. So you are actually going to divide by 120. You're going to divide that side by 120, and over here you would get the number of people would be 110. In an exam or a test, you are never asked to fill in all the values. Now remember, if your table does not have much space, you can put the values only. Sometimes you have lines at the bottom to show calculations, and at other times these blocks are much bigger so that you can show your calculation. So before we even plot the graph, you know that your graph, your expense graph, is going to start at 3,700. You will know that your number of people, when in doubt, this is always along the bottom axis. So the number of people, we went up to 131. You are going to go at intervals that are easy to use in 2s, 5s, 10s, and sometimes it's given to you, other times it is not. I need to stress that even if you can't do the table, you need to fill in some values. The other thing to remember is this is increasing at a constant rate, so is that one. So you know your graphs are going to be straight line graphs, and please will you use a ruler for a straight line graph. Remember that these are dotted lines because you cannot get half a person. So as soon as you say, can I get half of whatever's displayed here, and the answer is no, then you will have a broken line graph for both of those. So you will go and put your heading, you will label your axes, and then you will draw your graphs. And from this, the main thing that we are after is the point of intersection. So the break-even analysis, and you always asked to label it with a letter, and this is the only time that the letter is seen on the graph because it has to point to that particular place. Now, what does it mean for us in this context? Well, reading from the graph, at this point, you would take a ruler, and if your question says, from the graph, what would the cost be? So you have got two values that make up your break-even point, and if they said mark the place with the letter A, you would read off there, and that is less than 13,000. So from your graph, you would get a value of about 12,800 Rand, which you would get a mark for that and a mark for that on your cost or your expense axis. How many people at the break-even point? Well, we would label that with the letter B at the bottom here, and that would be approximately, reading from the graph, that would be about 115 people. Other questions related to this is what type of proportion is shown? Well, the only proportion that is shown is this graph here, and that is direct proportion because it starts at 0, or it goes through the origin. It increases at a constant rate. It is a straight line, so it increases at a constant rate of your income was 120, so it increases at 120 Rand per person. This graph shows no proportion because it does not start at the origin. There is a constant increase of 85 Rand per person. You can do the example on page 26. There's also, for practice, on page 35 in your summary and questions, and it is question number 3.